Little hint from the future while editing. Man of the West has a bit of robotic voice at the beginning, but it goes away in a moment. Sorry for that. Welcome to the second episode of the Of Games and Ring podcast. I have fantastic guests today, and we also will focus a bit more on Tolkien, but they can maybe introduce yourself for the maybe 5 people who don't know them. Let's start with Yoystan.
Hey everyone, I hope you all are doing well wherever you are in Middle-earth. Chris, thanks for having me. Matt, it's good to talk to the both of you. So, yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Hello everyone, I am Matt from Nerd of the Rings on YouTube, and yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here. It's great to hear both of you guys live. I've heard your voices on your YouTube videos, so it's kind of cool to hear you guys live.
Nice. So, yeah, we have a lot of interesting topics. Like I said, it will be a bit more focused today because of this experts when it comes to Tolkien lore. We will focus a bit more on Tolkien today, but also have a little gaming section that might be interesting for some people. We just talked recently a little bit about what games you are playing, and Yoystan, I think, said he usually play like Lord of the Rings games, or a lot of those.
Yeah, it's funny because like people say when you make your passion or your hobby your job or whatever, that you kind of lose interest in it. That's not at all been the case for me. Sure, maybe I don't like to necessarily edit in my spare time, but I still love playing Middle-earth games. And then after I play my Lord of the Rings online, I'll like read The Fall of Gondolin, and then I'll fall asleep, and then I'll wake up and play some Battle for Middle-earth. So it's like I'm always there.
Yeah, I can see this is something. Even though I have to admit, when it comes to gaming, when a new Lord of the Rings games would come out, I would definitely play it. But it's not like I would go back and replay old Lord of the Rings games, because my backlog of games I want to play is just so big.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's often like a problem. I also saw that a Nerd of the Rings played on a great charity stream. You played, I think, Lego Lord of the Rings.
That's right. Yeah, for 24 hours and 10 minutes. Great. I did get to take breaks. I earned like 10-minute breaks for every hour that I played.
Man.
But yeah, we raised, I want to say it was around $3,100 for the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. So that was fun.
That's awesome, man. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Lego Lord of the Rings and Hobbit games because as a dad, it's something that I can play with my kids. Obviously I'm not going to bust out Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War when the kids are around. But yeah, I'm kind of the same. I actually, because I spend so much time editing and researching, I don't have a whole lot of time for gaming anyway, and really didn't even before starting the channel. But I'm kind of different in a way where I will go back and play the old Lord of the Rings games that I'm a huge fan of. Like once in a while I'll bust out the old Return of the King on for original Xbox. I still have an Xbox 360. The only reason I have it is to play Return of the King once, every couple years. So that's one of my favorites. And then War in the North is another one.
Yeah, that's also great.
Visits. Yeah, when my brother visits, we do co-op on that.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome. What are the characters you two play?
So he's always I get hazy on the names. Is it Farin the dwarf?
Yeah.
His name.
Yeah.
And then I'm the ranger.
Is it Eridan?
Something like this.
Yes. Yeah. And so we're always bailing out the elf, who's the one that can heal us. I think, in retrospect, we might have gone a different route with that, but
that's pretty cool. Do you remember when Shadow of Mordor was first announced? Because I was very skeptical when I first saw the trailers when the game was announced, because it looked like Assassin's Creed in like disguise of on a lot with a lot of ring skin basically tagged onto it, and then I read, okay, it plays in Mordor. What a really strange decision. I mean, there's so many great places. Why exactly it has to play in Mordor?
You have all of Middle Earth to go with, and you choose the barren wasteland.
Right.
I found that a pretty weird decision, and was very skeptical, but I have to admit it turned out to be kind of a fun game, and it was with this what did they call it? This Nemesis system and these dynamic dialogues and so on. It was pretty, how to call it? Innovative, I would say. It was really not seen. It really surprised me just from a gameplay perspective. Even though the, let's say, the lore was a bit wonky, to say the least.
Yeah, I was about to ask, like, so I love the gameplay of both those games, but everything that, like, the things that always hold me back from, like, wanting to play it again or whatever is the lore, to be completely honest. Because sometimes it's just like a change. It's just kind of how, Jackson did with the movies, where it's like, oh, we're going to go a different direction. Sometimes it's a blatant disregard for the characters or the lore. I mean, see Helm Hammerhand as a Nazgul for that, or a Isildur as a Nazgul for that. Like, it gets really rough in that regard. And yeah, I mean, does that kind of bother you guys as well, or do you not really take that into consideration when you're playing it?
Yeah, so I always tell people, from time to time on the channel, I'll get people asking me, well, what about, Talion? Where does he come in? When I'm doing a video on Aragorn, I'm like, there is no Talion here. And I always tell people, go for the gameplay, not the lore when it comes to those games.
Yeah.
I think you're totally dead on. Like, the most egregious things are probably what you mentioned with, Helm Hammerhand and Isildur becoming wraiths. Like, it doesn't even make sense, honestly. But they just kind of like said, okay, we're gonna treat this as a sandbox and we're just gonna play in it, kind of thing. But as someone who really enjoyed Assassin's Creed, playing that back in like college and stuff, they're really, really fun games to play. And I would like to see, if they end up doing a third one, I'd like to see them do more of Middle Earth, what you guys touched on earlier. It's kind of odd that, we've had 2 games purely set in Mordor. It's like, man, I want to go to Rivendell, like, with this quality of a game. Like, show us some other places.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something that I always think about, and whether it comes to the Amazon Lord of the Rings show that's coming up or whatever it is like, with adaptations, as long as they stay true to the themes of Tolkien, I think that's what's important, to make you actually feel like you're in Middle Earth. It occurred to me when I was playing Shadow of War a couple months ago that it's almost, like you said, a sandbox game. It's almost a what if Aragorn took the One Ring kind of video game. Yeah. Because you have like Talion getting, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't gotten there yet, but he has to, build his own ring. I call this new ring the 2 ring, since it's not the 1 ring.
I like that one a lot.
Thanks. And so it's almost like, what if Aragorn got the 1 ring, and then eventually, Talion becomes a wraith, has to take on one of the 9. It's a very sandbox game. I like that.
Yeah, I can see this. I mean, I also see it a bit like a fan fiction, basically. That is maybe a way to describe it. And also, I think what it does, it makes people curious about some of the, let's call it, more advanced lore aspects of the game, like of the Tolkien's world. I mean, it's not correctly portrayed, but of course you hear about, for example, there's, I think in Shadow of Mordor is, for example, like you can find those little statues and items with a little bit of lore background going. For example, a statue of the 2 blue wizards and so on. So it can make people curious, and often people ask, okay, how does this fit to the lore? And that is basically where I get more positive, maybe towards this game, because it had a huge impact on my channel. It was basically I made a lore comparison video in 2017. I think it was March or something. About Shadow of Mordor and the book lore, and that was like the first video that blew up on my channel and basically notched my channel into the direction making more lore related stuff. So for me personally, it's a very special game. in that regard. I would never expected like anything like this, but yeah, here we can see it right now in the background. This is one of the items you can find. You get a little bit of background story here and there, and some interesting references, even to, for example, Gorlim, the guy from the First Age who betrayed Barahir, and so on. There's a lot of interesting aspects in this. I have to admit, I really enjoy this, even though it chronologically it makes no sense, and also some of the stuff they build to create this plot as you said, it makes no sense. It's really so far off.
I mean, I think if I recall from Shadow of Mordor, the first one, they had Celebrimbor forge the One Ring. So I think Sauron was also there, but I believe it was Celebrimbor himself.
Yeah, it was
the two of them.
Yeah, the two of them. I think Sauron forged it, and Celebrimbor basically refined it or something, and under the control of Sauron, something like this. And then he stole it, and it made no sense because he made himself invisible, and then Sauron couldn't see him anymore. That makes no sense, I guess, because you can of course see the unseen, but I don't know. It was really, there were some strange ideas in it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because you can tell that the developers or the writers, at least they looked deep enough into the lore to know what to kind of change. So, right, they had to look into the character of Celebrimbor, into how the One Ring was forged, the Second Age, all of that. But then they looked that deep, and rather than just translating it as Tolkien wrote it, they're like, okay, now that we know what it's like, we're just going to flip it on its head, have Celebrimbor wearing the One Ring during the War of the Last Alliance till it slips off his finger and falls on Sauron's finger, and then Sauron kills him. And it's like, what? You already are that deep in the lore, just go with the lore.
Yeah, totally. That is kind of, it's really strange in my opinion. I heard like some interviews, and they said that they also had to coordinate a lot with Middle-earth enterprises there to get anywhere going. But yeah, it's really strange that they came up with such a weird story. Especially what annoyed me the most was how they portrayed Celebrimbor. My imagination of this character was always he's like a hero. He's like the one who. Even though he maybe did a mistake by trusting Sauron, but I guess who can blame him? And on the other side, he also tried to make up for this mistake by hiding the 3 elven rings, and even under torture, he did not reveal where he put them. That is grim, but impressive.
That's a great point. I mean, of the Feanorians, Celebrimbor is definitely one of the best ones. He renounces his father in Nargothrond, and he like you say, he made the 3 elven rings. He hid them from Sauron. I also kind of view him as this tragic hero whose ambitions overcame his wisdom. I know he, at least in some versions of the story, he loved Galadriel, but Galadriel was with Celeborn. So he never married, he never had kids.
Exactly. That's he's really a tragic figure in the lore itself, and what the game portrays him more like, I would imagine, Feanor himself, basically. But Celebrimbor distanced himself from his grandfather, if you want to put it that way, and it's kind of weird, I guess. I mean, on a note, it of course fits some of the themes of the old lore in Tolkien's world to some degree, I guess. Like I said, he's reminiscent of Feanor a lot more than he is actually of Feanor's grandson. And like Feanor also smiths the Silmarilli. He could have used them to restore the trees. He did not decide it. Then Morgoth stole them. Then the Oath of Feanor happened. We know all these details, and then the whole tragedy that led to the death of most of his sons, and even the last surviving son also is a very tragic end if you think about that.
And they twisted that tragedy, the game did, into just I don't know, into something that is kind of tropey. It's something that you would see in just a lot of places, just kind of this evil guy. He tried to towards the end of Shadow of War, it's revealed that no, he doesn't just want to defeat Sauron. He wants to overcome and like subdue Sauron, make Sauron his slave, and then take over Middle Earth. And I'm like, that's not Celebrimbor.
Yeah, and that's not something that sounds like it's from Tolkien.
Yeah,
it doesn't really fit with Tolkien. I will say, on the topic of Celebrimbor, I gained an appreciation for the guy, like how much he's been through. When researching him, you realize he was in Nargothrond, which fell to Glaurung the dragon.
Yeah.
And then from there, he goes to Gondolin, which falls, in like spectacular, just horrifying fashion. And then he goes, First Age is over, Morgoth's overthrown, everything's gravy now. Let's go to Eriador. Starts his own realm, everything's going peachy, and then this guy shows up with plans for jewelry and all heck breaks loose. And his third fallen realm, like the guy cannot catch a break no matter where he chooses to live.
Good point. Yeah, that's a really good point, man.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You can't catch a break.
Yeah, if you show up to an elven realm and it's like, oh yeah, here's Celebrimbor, he lives here too. It's like, I'm gonna keep going. I think I'm gonna go to Lorien maybe, or Linden.
Yeah, as far away from him as possible. I mean, Galadriel had the right idea. She just went on the other side of the mountains and she was fine.
Yeah. That is true. That's true. The distraction follows right behind him. It's kind of impressive in that regard. Shall we move on a little bit? We have another interesting, when it comes to Lord of the Rings games, there's also, in my opinion, I still can't believe that it's going to be a thing, the Golem Game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it came out of nowhere, and I know the developer of it a little bit. They make usually adventures, so when they first announced, Daedalic Entertainment, I think they're called, they are making a Golem game. I thought, oh, that is interesting, like a little adventure, like not funny, but maybe more serious, but comparable to, I don't know, Monkey Island or something. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think from what I could tell from the Steam page, it's like the Steam page is up, but we don't really have any like announcements of when it's coming out or anything like that. But I think it's going to be more of a personality choice based game where when you do have to fight, it's stealth as Gollum would. And that's really interesting that it's going. I feel like like the Telltale games where it's a lot more choice based and speaking based. That's kind of what I'm thinking it's going to be, where you're trying to choose between Smeagol and Gollum. You're trying to figure out which decisions he should make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was really, at first, just based on the look of it, like you looking at the screenshots and stuff, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Shadow of Mordor, and the fact that we knew it was a stealth game. I mean, I generally enjoy the stealth aspect of Shadow of Mordor, but there's other things to break it up with. So I wasn't 100% sure, how am I going to feel about this game if it's all stealth and that's it. So I'm very curious to see what they do with it. I did like a trailer breakdown on my channel and just went like into kind of ridiculous detail, just trying to throw out ideas and stuff. Like I noticed he had like a fish hanging by his hip, like attached to his
that's true.
loincloth or whatever. So I'm like, is this a something where you have to eat, find sustenance once in a while, or does he use the fish as a weapon? Like, what's going on?
That'd be dope. That'd be awesome.
Can you imagine like Gollum just throwing fish at
jumps out from behind a rock screaming, and Mordor throws a fish at an orc.
That would be kind of funny. But also like the stealth I'm probably third-person game is not what I would expect from the Daedalic games. I mean, they got a lot bigger, but I think that is like a first time for them making a game like this. Also in 3D, usually they have these beautiful artworks or hand-drawn backgrounds and so on. This feels pretty much a bit out of the loop, not loop, but you know what I mean. It's an unusual step.
A little different.
Yeah.
And I think they didn't they recently announce that they were pushing it by a year? Like they brought in some other, was it a distributor or a publisher or something involved?
Yeah, I'm not sure who's if there's a publisher involved.
Yeah, I thought they were bringing in another company.
Maybe.
Forgive
No,
me.
that sounds about right. There was some kind of shift at a higher like management or
Yeah,
developer
because
level.
I think it was supposed to come out in 2021, and I think they pushed it to 2022.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know like they only have the rights to the Third Age, available for film and TV shows and games.
Yeah.
But I've always thought like a Skyrim Bethesda styled First Age game would be so amazing, where you go to Nargothrond, you go to Gondolin, Doriath, Angband. I've always thought, because like you guys say, the stealth aspect, the Mordor aspect, it's fun, but there is so much else in Middle Earth. I'd love to be a dwarf at the at the Nernaeth Arnoidiad, like running out of Belagost and just fighting a dragon. Like, that sounds awesome.
It has a lot of potential. We have to admit this. Like everything, like a game, a series or whatever, exploring the First Age, it would be absolutely mind blowing seeing this, I guess, coming to life. If it's done well, of course. But sadly,
I don't know.
Could be off. Yes, sorry.
I don't know if I'm the only person who does this, but I get like a little bit of Middle Earth vibes when I play Breath of the Wild, and so sometimes I'll put on like the Middle Earth soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
when I'm
That's
playing
awesome.
Breath of the Wild. I'm just like it's got that, obviously there's like killer robot things in Breath of the Wild that don't really jive, but I just imagine like, man, if just give me a Lord of the Rings version of Breath of the Wild, and it would just be so peaceful and relaxing to play.
Yeah,
it's funny, like I know it's perhaps not the most renowned or well-known game in Middle Earth. My all-time favorite game and favorite Middle Earth game is the Lord of the Rings Online, and it's because I feel like that when I'm playing that game. It's open world. You can walk from Forukel to Mordor and everywhere in between and do quests. And the music is amazing. It transports you there. Even just this morning, they released a new update with content. And that is what I always love to see in games, like that they care so much about the lore, the stories, the themes that they're telling.
Yeah.
To where it's like, oh, I'm in Middle Earth. There's no doubt about it,
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna be diving it. So I've only played LotR like maybe a handful of times over the course of the last few years, but I finally have a computer that will work with it.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
I was on a Mac there for a while, and like I updated the operating system like right when I was gonna start playing it, and then like it didn't work with the new operating system, and I was like, crud. But now I've got a new setup, so I'm gonna dive into LotR finally.
Good man.
I've got a dwarf created already.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you know
we know the dwarves are the best.
Oh yeah. Do you know what server you're on? If you're on Arkenstone, we can play together at some point.
Arkenstone. I will write that down. I think awesome. I just did whichever one was
first.
Which one was first? Which one said it was in the United States? Because I was like, hey, that's me.
Oh yeah, that's me.
So there will be maybe co-op session between you guys.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be cool.
I know they're in talks with, is it Athlon Games, the game that made, or the developers that made Warframe, that they're making that Amazon MMO that's supposedly coming out in the next few years.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
It seems kind of weird. I looked a bit into it for last episode, and we talked briefly about it, and it's really strange to me. Like, as you said, it's developed, I think, by Athlon Games, and the weird thing is that originally it's a project from China, so there's like a sub company of Tencent or so involved, and then they reached out to Amazon and asked, "Hey, we have Athlon Games on it. Can you help us with it?" And then Amazon went on the project. They're also Middle-earth Enterprises, the company that holds the film rights for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and the merchandise rights. Also involved into it. Like, it's a really weird alliance. And when it comes to rights, I have no idea what will come out of this, because Lord of the Rings, not Lord of the Rings, Amazon has like the serious rights. So originally I thought this would might be tied to the upcoming Amazon Lord of the Rings series, but it seems like, considering that originally this was not connected in any shape or form, that will be not the case. But I don't know, maybe they change it. I have no idea. It's like a little box of surprises when it comes to this, what can come out of it. Also, I mean, Athlon Games, as you said, is like a competent developer, so there can come out of it something that is worth your time, but not sure. Like Amazon on the other side, they still have to prove that they can make games, so I'm a bit skeptical too, but I don't know. I hope it's good, because more Lord of the Rings games are always great. Even though I have to admit, I'm not that big into MMORPGs.
Yeah. It's definitely its own kind of genre. I feel like people either love or hate it.
Now, this is, I'm curious, like, what this new game. My first thought when they said this new MMO was coming out was how it would differentiate itself from Lord of the Rings Online.
Yeah. I think they said it's going to be a few thousand, like originally, and like Chris said, it could just straight up be Second Age now. They said it was going to be a couple thousand years before the Lord of the Rings, but not attached to the Amazon show originally. And I'm like, okay, so Angmar War? Like, I assume we're going to get all of the Second Age with the Amazon show, so probably not War of the Last Alliance. So, I have no idea what time zone they would, or what time frame they'd be in, what characters they would allow us to play in that game. Yeah, I have no idea, and I know Amazon's track record with games is not great, so I'm not extremely hopeful, but who knows? I would love for there to be this Second Age game where you're running around as one of the Gwaithai Myrdain fighting, in the War of the Elves and Sauron. But
yeah, that would be pretty cool if we could get this, please. I hope, please, people don't screw this up, Amazon and friends. That would be really amazing. That would be really amazing, especially like this also often gives like an opportunity for us, let's call us content creators, to create content. Like, you could cover this, you could look into, compare it to the lore, praise some good stuff, criticize some others. It's always fun and interesting content for a lot of people. So in that regard, I hope they don't screw up. It would be great. I mean, even if they screw up, we can still complain a lot, but I guess a more balanced approach is more fun, I guess.
Yeah, I guess either way, we'll have content.
Yeah, we will have content, I guess. But on the other side, if they're not successful, with what they do, they, this could probably maybe block future other games that come out. If the interest in the franchise is decreasing, that could be a problem, I guess. But I hope that won't
honestly,
be the case.
Those are my thoughts too with the Amazon show at large, which is a whole separate conversation. But like, I don't know what they have the rights to. Do they only have the rights to the appendices? If that's the case, that's not a lot. But if it's not a great show, it might hurt people's interest in the Silmarillion, in the Second Age, like as the lore, and that does not have a great trickle down effect for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think so. From what I've heard and read, I think, and this is all rumor, obviously, but there's some speculation that they have rights to at least some of the material from Unfinished Tales.
Oh, that's
because
awesome.
there's quite a lot about Numenor in Unfinished Tales, which would come into play. I guess the way I always kind of look at adaptations, and typically I'm thinking, movies and games, but it could, or movies and TV series, but it could apply to games as well. I never worry too much about Tolkien, especially after the massive success of Lord of the Rings. Like, I mean, even, the Hobbit trilogy, which personally I think is better than most people give credit for. But even with it having, lesser acclaim and, not being as well received, Tolkien's works are still massively popular. So I don't worry. Even with the Amazon show, I'm not overly worried that, like if they screw it up, that it's going to damage Tolkien. I don't think you can, the nice thing about Tolkien, and, before we went on, we were talking a little bit about Star Wars and Tolkien. The nice thing with Tolkien, I feel like you have all this fantastic source material. Whereas like with something like Star Wars, it's purely films. It originated with films. It's always been about the film. So when you add more films to that, it kind of dilutes the overall product, I think, more. Whereas we'll always have the books to go back to and the true
Yeah.
canon of Tolkien for sure.
That's true. I really like that sentiment. You know, I think with the Lord of the Rings like movies, I know how many fans it inspired, you know, myself included, to look into the books, to look into the games and all of that. And really that's my worry, is that if the show isn't great, or if a game isn't great or something, that people are like, man, the second age this must not be as good as the third, or like
It's
only
more of
Lord
a
of the Rings
missed
is good.
opportunity. Really.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want them to be like, oh, I'm just not going to read the Silmarillion now.
Yeah.
And yeah, versus if the show was good, then they would read it. Like,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think like Tolkien already, what do you say it in English? He stood the test of time, something like this. He proved himself, and I mean, the Lord of the Rings came out in the 50s, and it's still there and still a thing. And they would have to screw up a lot to damage it, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, because and I think, you know, the thing that is, you know, if Amazon, I mean, obviously I'm not going here predicting that it's going to be terrible, but
sure.
If you know, if it did come out, I hope it's not. I really hope it's
too.
amazing. Obviously, we all hope it's amazing. But I mean, just looking at absolute worst case scenario from a Tolkien fan perspective, if they just, you know, totally botched it and it was bad, you know, you'd have everyone who has anything more than a surface level knowledge of Tolkien saying this isn't really Tolkien, like this isn't a representation. So like, you know, yes, the more surface level fans I think could be turned off by it, but I think anyone who's even a fan of just the films would see the difference and say, you know, something doesn't line up here.
Yeah, that's true. You know, I just, you know, in 20 years from now or something, I'd love to be able to, you know, show my kids like, or like, I watched the movies myself with my parents and all of that, and to just sit down and have my kids be like, let's rewatch the Amazon show. And it's like, it's just like how at the beginning of Fellowship, right? You hear that first song kick in and Galadriel's monologue, and it's just like, oh, I'm here, I'm back in Middle Earth. Good. That's what I want for the Amazon show.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I feel like. We'll have like a good feeling within the opening seconds of the show. It'll be like, I either feel like I'm back in Middle Earth or I don't. How's that for a snap judgment, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be able to write our reviews in 5 seconds after the first episode. Love it.
That is true. I mean, also, when they screw up, I guess there will be a lot of us who will just call them out for it, like, and it could shift again. Like, if we probably, I guess all of us expect that when the series comes out, we get more attention to this particular topic in our channels, and as a result, we could even notch the direction again to the books and say, in the books it's much better. It's like this, but I also heard, like, probably just jumping to a topic that Matt mentioned like 10 minutes ago or something, that they have rights, that they also negotiated more rights to it. That's a rumor, like, and if they can have, or if they have access to the unfinished tales, I don't know, that's just such a big opportunity. There's just also so many people involved. I can't imagine that they really screw that up. I mean, if they have access to some parts, at least, of the unfinished tales, nobody had this any time before them. So, yeah, I guess they probably know what's on the line if they screw up. Maybe the Tolkien estate or the Tolkien family won't be giving more rights or so. So I think they know what's on the line there, and I can't imagine they will totally screw up, at least lore-wise, etc. Also, when they announced the show, they had like Tom Shippey on board, which is of course a legend when it comes to Tolkien scholars. So that sounded good on paper.
Oh yeah.
Let's hope good stuff comes out of this. let's really hope it does. But yeah, I'm really curious what they will do with it. I mean, the Unfinished Tales is also a very complex book with sometimes several versions of different stories, and some even contradict in slight ways the what we find in the appendices of Lord of the Rings. So let's see what they make out of this. I'm really curious into how they ship around those, let's call them little traps, lore traps, if you want. Might be interesting, but I assume, I mean, I don't know, can just briefly talk about like the expectations. What do you think, what will the show cover, at least in their first season? Like which aspect of the lore when it comes to the Second Age? Do you have any speculation going on there?
Yeah,
maybe wishes?
I've thought like kind of an anthology series where it's like 3 or 4 seasons and each season is kind of its own story would be amazing. So, season 1 is, Tar Miniatur Elros leading his people to Numenor and kind of the foundation there. The elves starting to rebuild in Middle-earth after the Wars of the First Age. Second season is the Gwaithai Myrdain and the Forging of the Rings. It would be kind of tough. This is why each season would have to be kind of its own stories, because you would have men and elves over 3,000 years. So you can have the same elven characters. You can't have the same men characters because they died 1,800 years ago,
Right.
So, the second season is the Forging of the Rings. That one ends with Sauron forging the One. The third season is the War of the Elves and Sauron, kind of Numenor coming into Middle-earth. Fourth season, Downfall of Numenor, and then maybe fifth season, War of the Last Alliance. Like something like that would be amazing.
I think I've put probably an embarrassing amount of time into like thinking about this through thinking through my mind, like during the summer, like every time I would mow the yard, I'd be like, okay, so let's see here, so season 1, so
I love it.
I think I think Yoystan is right on with I could very easily see the entire series. I think I've heard thrown out the 5 seasons thing. I could very easily see the end of season 5 being the War of the Last Alliance.
Yeah.
I think in one of my videos I said that I would love it if they just ended with Elrond yelling Isildur.
That would be amazing.
And just like cut to black. I think that would be an awesome way to end it. But I have a hard time thinking that they would wait beyond the first season for the creation of the rings. True. Just because that's something that's so familiar. So that's gonna be something from a marketing perspective. Obviously as a Tolkien fan, I'd be like, we're gonna film everything that ever happened.
Aldarion and Arendis need at least 20 episodes. Like,
right? Yeah. So I have to step outside of my Tolkien self for a little bit and say like, okay, what will people, casual fans actually watch?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking that maybe season 1 ends with the sack of Eregion, after Sauron has forged the ring and he attacks Eregion, and then like your season 1 kind of cliffhanger is like he's gonna try to just take over all of Middle Earth, and how are the remaining elves, Elrond and Gil-galad and the Numenorians, how are they going to stand against that? That's just a theory.
I like that. I definitely like that a lot. That's a great place to end the season for sure.
I would say an anthology series on the Silmarillion would be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I've always thought a trilogy of movies, Baron and Luthien, Children of Hurin, and Fall of Gondolin would be that'd be amazing. But
let's face it, we would take anything from the first series. Like you could say, here's an animated children's cartoon, and we would still watch it.
Dude, that'd be a crazy children's cartoon, like the kinslayings and stuff.
They just have to tone it down, like be like some little 5-year-old version of it would be like, they stole my ships.
Yeah exactly.
gave me a boo-boo.
Oh man,
Yeah, that could that could
There you
work.
go. The kinslaying. That could be a good children's book. Let's do a kinslaying children's book.
Mostly just cuts to black, and we just see everything else around the battle.
I think, Matthew, did you watch on your channel some of the unusual Tolkien media? Did you also check the what's it called, the animated film from the 70s? For example, the Hobbit one, or
So I've basically watched the ones that aren't not the non like Rankin and Bass or what's the other Bakshi.
yeah.
I haven't watched those on the channel because those are obviously copyright and everything, but I've found some really obscure adaptations. Like there was one I can't remember off the top of my head. It's like I want to say it was made in like South America somewhere or something.
Wow, that's awesome.
But it's an animated one that's only like 10 minutes long, and I don't know if this is the one you're talking about of The Hobbit, where they just changed a ton of stuff. Like Smaug is named Slag, and
Oh man.
And Bilbo and Thorin are the only two. It's Bilbo, Thorin, and Gandalf. And Gandalf is a wizard in a tower for some reason. And they go to rescue the Princess Mika from Slag the Dragon, and they use the Arkenstone as, sorry, spoiler alert, in case anyone was waiting to watch
I'm on the edge of my seat.
This cartoon that's been out for like 60 years, but they actually use the Arkenstone as an arrowhead, and they kill Smaug with or Slag, sorry, with the arrow
Slag
made from the Arkenstone, and then Bilbo and Princess Mika get married and live happily ever after.
That like brings it triggered some memories from me that I don't think I've ever talked about on my channel. With there's a play that I saw. It was actually done at the university that I went to before I went there, and it was The Hobbit, like the theatrical edition of The Hobbit. The first half, before they got to the Misty Mountains, was actually pretty good from what I remember, and then after that, it became kind of like that cartoon. This is where I don't know if like that the memory was repressed, because you had like, I think Thorin was the one to kill Smaug, and he like ran a sword through the dragon. And again, this was on stage, so this was all. Yeah. Oh man, it was. Yeah, you had like character changes, name changes like that cartoon. Maybe it was built based off the cartoon and not the book. That would actually make a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I just looked it up. It was made in 1967. And it sounded like, if memory serves, it was one of those things where someone had the rights to The Hobbit and they were going to lose the rights, like they were going to revert back to Tolkien and the publisher or whatever, unless they made a film. And so he made this film. It's 11 minutes long, and just quickly and as cheaply as possible, so that he could sell the rights back to Tolkien instead of just losing the rights.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is.
I've got a couple others on my channel. Yeah, if you look at some of my past live streams, I've also got like I think there was a Finnish version like of The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. I can't remember which one.
I forgot that you did those, because that was like a year ago or so. Like,
yeah, it was like last summer that I did those. But yeah, there's some obscure adaptations that it was a lot of fun to do those on live streams, because I didn't watch them ahead of time. I was like, all right, we're gonna watch this. Let's see what happens.
That's awesome. Oh man.
So, shall we? Speaking of unusual things, there's also like an unusual thing upcoming. You probably know what I'm talking about, the Nature of Middle-earth book.
Yeah.
And we talked about with Dan, Voice of Geekdom, shoutouts to you, man, last episode, that this might be potentially one of the last publications with Tolkien material in it that there are left. Ever, basically. Maybe that is the last pieces that were not published before.
Although we've said that many times before,
Yeah,
about
that's
20
true.
years.
That is true.
But you could be right. I don't know how many notes this man wrote throughout his life, but he wrote a lot of notes. It's amazing.
Yeah,
It's
it
amazing.
really is. So this might be one of the last History of Middle Earth like books that we could get. It's really unusual. What are your expectations? What do you expect there to be in this book?
So last year, I made a video on the Valian years and how elves age. Most of that material came from, I believe, the Peoples of Middle Earth, one of like the last books in the history of Middle Earth saga. And it was like it's really, again, these are like really kind of obscure notes, super fascinating. How years were measured, for instance, before the sun and the moon. It was like it's some equation for every
like
year.
9.5, I think.
Yeah, it's like 9.587, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that. and then you have to calculate that into the elven. So any elf who was like born, in 1050 of the years of the trees, you have to take how long, how many years they had in the years of the trees, multiply it by that, and then you have the actual amount of hour years that they were alive in. It was super complicated. One of the hardest videos I've ever made, because I'm just not a math-minded individual. So with this book, I'm curious to see if it expands on that, right? So kind of the book overview here, it says, from sweeping themes as profound as elvish immortality and reincarnation and the powers of the Valar, to more earthbound subjects of the lands and beasts of Numenor, the geography of the rivers and beacon hills of Gondor, and even who had beards. So it's going to be very specific details, and I'm excited for that. Who knows? Maybe that last part actually does catch my attention, because we know Círdan had a beard.
Yeah.
What other elf had a beard?
That's the father of. Let me just think about.
It's the father-in-law of Feanor, right?
Yeah, the father of the wife of Feanor, exactly. What was his name? Machtan or something like this.
Yeah, that sounds right. Mirthanel or something like that.
Yeah, Machtan. I'm not sure if it's Mach. No, it must be. It would be weird. It would be Machtan, but whatever. Something like this.
Yeah, Machtan.
I'm really excited, to kind of go off of what Yoystan said there. Anytime, it doesn't happen very often, but the idea of getting new Tolkien material to read that nobody's read before is pretty amazing. I get excited about like a new illustrated edition when it's like, hey, Ted Naismith, John Howe, Alan Lee, or any combination of them have done more artwork for this book. I'm like, all right, let's do this.
I'm buying the largest print.
Give me some pictures to stare at and soak in. So like the idea that we have new words and knowledge to soak in is even more exciting. I wonder, with the growing beards, if that's just talking about elves, or if we're gonna go into
I think it's everybody.
Dwarf women, hobbits,
That's awesome. I know, for instance, I'm sure like they'll mention Prince Imrahil, because it was like, I think it was pointed out in the Return of the King that he couldn't really grow facial hair because of his elvish lineage, and so it's really specific details. But like you said, Matt, it's really fascinating. Honestly, it's new content, and that's going to be amazing to cover.
And the one that caught my, on the blurb that describes what's in there, the nature of the Valar, is interesting. Because when I first read the title, "The Nature of Middle Earth," I thought like trees and
birds and
plants,
beasts,
birds and beasts, and it's like, no, the nature is in like the essence, or the how things work in Middle Earth.
And there will be a German translation of the book, which also astonished me. I did not expect that, because some of the more specific books I think don't have a German translation. However, this one gets one. The German title is Natur und Wesen von Mittelerde, which translates to nature and essence or being of Middle Earth itself, something like this. So it's a bit more complicated translated, but probably it's the nature part clears things up.
Clears it up a little bit.
It does. So it might be more correct for us to say the essence of Middle Earth, like the two of you said. It's kind of because, yeah, I mean, the elvish reincarnation, that's always been a fascination to me since they're bound to the world of Middle Earth, but men can just leave. Because we know Feanor was eventually reincarnated before the Dagor Daggerath, or after the Dagor Daggerath, so he could present the Silmarils to Yavanna. But that's amazing. Like, hopefully we'll get more details about all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
man, could you imagine if we got like a scene or dialogue or something of Glorfindel with his reincarnation? That's one that's always I always think of when I think of elven reincarnation, because I get so many questions on I'm planning a video right now, scripting a video on Glorfindel, because I get the question so often when I reference Glorfindel in my first age videos, and then in my third age videos, people are like, what's the deal here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
so
fair.
I'm curious, like if we got some more, he's like one of those that's not mentioned a ton, but when he's mentioned, he's really important.
Yeah, exactly. It draws your attention for sure.
Yeah.
He's, I guess, also like a fan favorite. I also did a video on him like last summer or something. Yeah, I think in August. And that was also very successful, which I did not expect, but I won't complain. And that is, also one of my favorite side characters of the elves. So I like him a lot. And yeah, you're right. That would be really amazing seeing what he did in Valinor, and did he have contact with. It's like only mentioned in the Peoples of Middle Earth that he was seen as an equal among the Maiar. It's a bit worded differently, but
sorry.
yeah, no problem. That was done.
I think my favorite elf of all the Legendarium is Finrod Felagund.
Yeah, you can see that.
And he was also reincarnated.
Yeah, true.
In Valinor, and hopefully we get more about him as well.
Yeah, that would be also great. Like more about Finrod would also be really appreciated. It's also one of my favorite characters with Círdan.
Oh yeah, Círdan is my second favorite as well.
He also is a guy with a beard, so he's also unusual in that regard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is interesting. Yeah, when it comes to the Valar, I expect maybe something, even though there is already a bit about it. But for example, all the Valar have, I'm not sure if all of them, but most have like a brother or a sister. They are siblings often. Some are married and so on. I maybe could imagine that Tolkien probably wrote a bit about this, like some essay, some notes or something that was not published yet, that maybe goes a bit into the direction covering maybe these relationships. I only know that basically when Eru thought them into life, I don't know how to phrase it differently, he imagined those Valar as siblings in some cases, and that is why they have this being. But maybe there's a bit more to it. And also there's the long question about the origin of the elves, and there's the story with the three fathers of the elves, which is, in my opinion, not canon, and even among the elves not considered really canon, with, I always forgot the name, Ene, Tata, and something with email or something like this.
Is it Ingwe, Finwë, and
that are then the later kings, Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë.
Yeah, Elwë. Yeah.
That are then the later ambassadors, but there's also like in the History of Middle Earth books like a story that is a different version of this, where they are the unbegotten, so the elves that have no parents, and they awoke, and like 144 elves awoke, and each man also had like a wife that was waking next to him, and these three were the three elves that awoke first. And if you read a bit into the family trees and some hints here and there, then you can come to the conclusion that, for example, Elwë can't be unbegotten because he has a brother, so he must have parents. And some make the argument that because the Valar have also siblings, but no parents in the classical sense, except for Eru, I guess, but that's true for the elves in some sense too, that they also could have been thought as as siblings when they were created, and the story is not really true. But yeah, there's a lot of discussion, some things going on about this weird story, and maybe we learn a little bit more about this. So that's one very specific topic, or few topics I would love to learn more about. Also, the beard thing is also interesting.
It's always good. Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't put much thought into that and what the relationships between the siblings signify. That's really interesting. I hope we do get more on that.
Yeah, I've always been really the only one that I really put much thought into was the fact that Melkor and Manwë are considered brothers.
Yeah,
like that just seemed like such a strong, historically speaking, such a strong theme or trope, I guess you could call it, in
the
storytelling. These brothers that are diametrically opposed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also looked at oh, sorry.
Oh, so no, you're good. I was gonna say, and reading more about Tolkien, I'm always about that. So
yeah, it's really fun. I have to admit, it's really fun to read about.
So Yoystan, it would just crush you if this book was like, Tolkien, yeah, he was actually kind of a wimp, and ignore that other stuff. He's actually
I wouldn't regard it as canon.
Yeah, there's always that card you can pull in Tolkien's universe, which can be a plus.
Yeah.
We just discovered this note that Tolkien wrote on a napkin in his last year of life that said Tolkien was actually a wimp.
No, that would crush me.
That would be really unfortunate. But I don't expect a finding like this. Maybe the writer Hofstetter is also a fan of Tolkien, so we would not include it.
Oh yeah, he's just rip up the napkin. No one ever needs to know. And it's interesting that you brought up the editor, because once upon a time this would have been Christopher Tolkien doing this. So it's really cool that Carl Hofstadter was able to get these notes, was able to secure them and be like, oh, there's a book in here, just like Christopher Tolkien did.
Yeah, I think I get the impression that he was handpicked by the family, to carry this on. And I've always said, I think there was some recent discussion on Twitter or someplace that I'm better off not spending time on, probably. That was talking about the expiration of copyright after author's death and stuff like that, and how if Middle Earth was in public domain, how many stories could be published. But for me, that the very thought of that kind of makes me cringe a little bit. It's like I would love, if the Tolkien estate deemed it appropriate, or they found someone that they thought was right to take some of these stories and expand on them, take Fall of Gondolin and make a full narrative novel out of it. If they said, hey, whether it's Carl Hofstetter or somebody else, that's how I would want the next phase of Middle Earth to be, would be a hand-picked person by the Tolkien family to expand on it, not just a free-for-all, let's have
writer from Tumblr.
It's kind of it's kind of like Sherlock Holmes, where there's 8 TV shows going on at once, and people can just do whatever.
No, that's a great point. I've actually thought about that recently, when I was going back through the Unfinished Tales, and of anyone, I imagine Christopher Tolkien. I would have wanted, if I wanted anybody to write more stories to kind of finish off those, I would have wanted it to be him, because he understood, he was the child whose father told him these stories. And I think he would have done a great job in finishing the Fall of Gondolin and kind of doing all these things that Tolkien, he's, of anyone, the closest to knowing how Tolkien would have wanted these stories to go,
Yeah. And so, I always think of how much I love the book Children of Húrin, which is, I think some people are surprised to learn, when they look at the books Beren and Luthien and Fall of Gondolin, which are just kind of presenting it from a more academic perspective, like, okay, here's one version that he wrote in this year, here's another version. Like Children of Húrin is just a straight narrative story.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head how much of that, like if that was all J.R.R. Tolkien's writings, or if like Christopher Tolkien had to fill in some gaps here and there, or how that.
That's a good question.
I'd have to look back at that, but at one time I thought that he had to kind of like piece together stuff.
I think he kind of did. Sorry.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah, I think he did, especially when you look at the Silmarillion, which was published after Tolkien's death.
Mhm.
I think he did have some kind of names to change and some things to just to make it coherent, to make it make sense. So I think he did that with the Children of Húrin as well. And I mean, yeah, he even says with the Silmarillion that there were still published mistakes, such as Orodreth's lineage, or I believe Gil-galad's lineage as well.
Yeah,
was another mistake. Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting, but I doubt that mistake was Christopher Tolkien's fault, even though he kind of, from what I can tell, put that on himself. It's just probably you have all these names and these lineages, and you're like, okay.
Yeah. When he formed the Silmarillion, he had not access to all the materials, so haven't worked through all of them, because sometimes they are, I don't know, with a scholar or something, and then he couldn't use them to form the Silmarillion, and that of course generated some problems. Like, for example, as you mentioned, in the Silmarillion, Fingon, the son of Fingolfin, is the father of Gil-galad, but later Tolkien revealed that he put him into Orodreth's family tree, and I think Christopher Tolkien comments on that maybe this is one of the lineages where he should have kept the parentage secret. Because it's just very messy going around like this. But Fingon would also not work, because then Turgon would not have become High King of the next High King after Fingon.
I always like the idea that Gil-galad was the son of Orodreth, and Orodreth was the son of, is it Ignor? One of the sons of Finarfin, because it's so far removed from the sons of Fingolfin, to where it's like you saw how many High Kings of the Noldor get killed, to where it's just like, okay, who's next in line? Oh, the second cousin removed. Like, sure, you're next, because the first age was so brutal on our kindred. Like, okay, you're the next closest one we've got. Everyone else has been slain pretty much. It just kind of speaks to that sorrow. But it's stuff like that, the ambiguous nature of lineage, of characters, of names. I'm sure that was a lot to take on in the editing process.
It's impressive.
Yeah, especially when you have like character names that Tolkien kept, but just changed who they were. Because I think originally Finrod was supposed to be one of the sons of Finwë, but then he changed it to
he
be
was the father of Galadriel.
yeah, not the brother. So, yeah.
And there's just a lot of things going on. Like also some of the work simply did not fit, and Christopher Tolkien with the Silmarillion wanted to make it fit to the Lord of the Rings without changing the Lord of the Rings. I guess if Tolkien would have finished the Silmarillion himself, there would be a second edition with some changes for the Lord of the Rings too. That is, in my opinion, not very unlikely. And since he could not simply do this, it would probably generate an outcry. He had to carefully select which pieces actually fit the Lord of the Rings the best, and maybe made some changes. One of the bigger changes I know that Christopher Tolkien did, at least for the Silmarillion, was how Thingol died in Doriath. With the whole story with the dwarves was a bit different in the original intended version, and that is where Christopher Tolkien had to make some changes. I'm not sure how it was in the Children of Húrin. What changes are there? I have to admit, I'm not sure. I assume he could, because that was, I guess, always a relatively fleshed out story. So maybe the piecing together worked a lot better.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's really interesting how many notes Tolkien wrote.
He was really obsessed with his works and with the detail. But what is, I guess, at least when it comes to me, that's what I really, really like about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you just see all these there's these parallelisms between characters and events and ages. After reading it for 60 years, you're like, oh, that's new. That's not an accident, you know, that's a feature. And that's where we can get 12 history of Middle Earth volumes, and then also this new book, and then also the Fall of Gondolin, Children of Húrin, and Baron and Luthien,
Unfinished Tales, and so on. It's
Unfinished Tales, exactly. The letter, oh man.
Letters. Then there are also the poems from Tolkien himself, where also some lore notes are inside. I made like I have a video series about where I analyze the book and make some comparisons to the films at times, and the Lord of the Rings. And there's, for example, when Gildor meets the hobbits. I read somewhere, I think it was on Tolkien Gateway, that they came from what is it called? Emun Bereid, where the Palantir is stored by the elves.
Yeah, the Elosterion stone.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, the Elosterion stone. I couldn't come up with a name. And they came from
I don't know
there.
how I could.
Yeah. Well, you're also a very knowledgeable lore person, so of course you
Thanks.
can.
But sometimes, though, it's like I'll be talking about, Orome's horse Nahar, and it's like, how did I remember that? I don't know.
As some names go easier than others, I have to admit. And however, I tried to find out where this is, because it's not mentioned in the Lord of the Rings where they came from. And it's actually in one of the, I think it's in The Road Goes On, Ever On, is the poem collection. There's like a little lore section about exactly where they came from. It's also from Tolkien, so I guess it's canon. And but it's sometimes it's just so hidden, the lore and the notes where you can find them. It's really, really impressive.
Absolutely.
I mean, what other created world has 12, soon to be 13 volumes, like History of Middle Earth, where it's explaining not only bits and pieces of the world, but how the world was created. There's nothing like it. It's insane.
It's really, I mean, it's also difficult to keep like an overview of all of it. It's just so much information, and sometimes you overlook something. It's really impressive. Then, as we learned, there are also some other things like what's it called? Oh yeah, here my trusty mod mentioned it here in chat. The Parma Elder Lamberon, I think it's called, and the Vineyard Tenguas, which has also Tolkien notes in them about the languages and some words and so on, but also some story notes here and there, which is really impressive. And I think Hostetter was also involved creating them. I think Dan mentioned last episode that he's an expert on Elvish and the languages, etc. So I expect some insights there too, which is always interesting to get like these insights from a true expert. Like you said, it's just so impressive how much there is, how much detail there is. There's always, what fascinates me is you look into Tolkien's world and his works, and you can ask, okay, why is that? Who's that character? How are these events connected? And you almost always get an answer to that. That is just so astonishing to me. And even though I guess we make videos on YouTube for quite some time and have done a lot of reading and research to do so, and we always read like a passage and notice, at least that's for me the case, notice something new I haven't noticed before.
Every time. And it's it really speaks to it that the world of Middle Earth, of Arda, was created out of a song, out of music. And music has themes, right? Themes that recur, choruses that come up again and go back down into something new. And that's kind of how it is in Middle Earth's lore, where something in the Third Age will connect all the way back to the First Age, or the Years of the Trees, or the Years of the Lamps. And it's like a song, right? It's truly... and Tolkien, I don't think that's an accident, because, that's how old stories, old Norse tales and mythologies were told, is in songs and around a campfire. And it's always somewhat circular in its themes. You always have things that recall or call forward to other themes. And Yeah, Middle Earth is really just one big song, and that's why Tom Bombadil, in my opinion, is like he might be Eru, he might be the personification of the music.
Yeah,
it's really fascinating.
there are a lot of theories about what he could be.
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna follow up with, what Yoystan was saying, how things, echo from the first age, and you feel the effects or references, clear into the third age. I think one of my favorite examples of that is the Ring of Barahir.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, and I recently, as I was listening through on the audiobook or reading a passage out of Fellowship of the Ring, I got to thinking, here's Aragorn, who now has the Ring of Barahir that originally belonged to Galadriel's brother.
Mm-hmm.
And like, here he is in Lorien. Like, this is, a descendant so far beyond, how many generations from Barahir and from Beren. And, that ring originally belonged to Galadriel's brother. And like, it's not anywhere referenced, in that passage that, Galadriel acknowledges that, or that it enters her thoughts at all. But you do kind of wonder, just because this world is so amazing and feels so real, you can just automatically, think in your mind like, oh, how would Galadriel react to that? Seeing the ring again that her brother used to possess, that she probably hasn't seen in, thousands of years.
Yeah, that is very true.
That's a great point. Yeah,
there's just so much just about this ring. You can just talk for like an hour. There's so much detail about it.
Yeah,
and there's all kinds of stuff like that. That's kind of my overall point. There's just so many things like that. Where, you talk about the Palantiri and just all these things that
grab a
connect.
random place. Yeah,
right. Yeah.
And they'll all connect back. I mean, I always find it, so fascinating, the story of Elros and Elrond, and how the two of them would go on to influence their respective kindreds. But it started with the two of them, and started with their father and their mother, who saved the first age and who saved the world. So yeah, it's so amazing. Yeah, you grab anything and there's a deep lore behind it. It's incredible.
Yeah, that is very, very true.
It makes it really fun for those of us who really nerd out on this stuff, because you get someone who's a casual, like a friend who's just kind of casually into Lord of the Rings, and you're like, if you're watching the movie, they ask, hey, what's the deal with that thing? And it's like, you could easily pause the movie and spend the next half an hour telling them about an item, a sword, or a ring, or something,
or some trivia behind. Did you know that Vigo broke his toes when he kicked that helmet? Yeah, that's the classic.
There's that as well.
But speaking of the movies, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about the 4K editions.
Oh yeah, I forgot that. Sorry.
No, you're good. I think it's interesting because when we talk about detail and we talk about the 4K, I think that really maximized how Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit should be watched. Because I remember, going through watching the Fellowship of the Ring on the on 4K, and Frodo wakes up in Rivendell after all of the the flight to the ford and all of that. And I remember looking at the background, because it's more focused everywhere versus just on like the characters, and seeing the carven bed frame that Frodo was lying on. It was like a statue of Luthien above him with her arms outstretched as he was like waking up. And I was like, well, I assume it's Luthien, but it could be just an elf maiden. But like that kind of, so somebody carved that, somebody made that,
I can't remember. I think it might be Elwing.
It could be.
I can't remember. I read somewhere who it was, but now now I'm second guessing myself.
I think
Luthien or Elwing. I can't remember which one.
That's amazing.
I think I mentioned that in a video of mine too, but I tried to find out, but I could not find like any comment on a creator of it, and so I start speculating. I could always also imagine, I think it was Este, because she was the Valar of Healing.
Yeah.
But there was like there was
Amazing.
some detail on it where I thought, okay, this might be connected. But all the guesses you or what you said is right. Could be Elwing, which would make totally sense. It could also be like Luthien or something. I just interrupted Matt, I think.
Oh no, I was just saying the carving thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even next to the bed, you see like the elvish. I believe there was at least an elvish drink there next to Frodo on like the nightstand, maybe some food as well. And I'm like, somebody put time into that, and somebody made that just so it could be in the background of a couple seconds of a scene, and never see it again. But it's still a part of that deep world building that Jackson even took into the movies. I recall another scene from the Two Towers where you look behind Elrond as he's talking to Arwen about the death of Aragorn and how the doom of men is different than the doom of elves. And you see on the tapestry behind, you see the sun and the moon with two trees, the two trees of Valinor underneath them, kind of with their branches encircling the sun and the moon. Like, that is amazing.
Yeah.
Somebody wove that. Somebody made that tapestry, and it's like, what?
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. That 4K is the best for that.
Yeah, there's so many things like that. And another thing that I picked up on with the 4K is the detail on clothing that I had never noticed before. Like some of the clothes you can pick up, I think for example, I think when Frodo wakes up in Rivendell, he's wearing an all white shirt, and I had never really noticed that there's a pattern on that shirt. I mean, I'm not surprised there's a pattern, but like you could see like how intricate it was and how elvish it looked, and it's stuff like that that just really pops. Or these big wide epic landscape shots, you can see like every boulder in place. Obviously they didn't place all the boulders, but it's still the level of detail is insane, and it just makes you appreciate the artistry even more.
Yeah, that is totally true. There's just so much detail in those films, and I think that is also needed to make like an adaptation that is, let's call it, worthy of what Tolkien did, if you know what I mean. Like there's just, Tolkien also put a lot of detail into his works, and then of course it would totally make sense to also put the same detail in an adaptation, just to make it basically fitting, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to tie it back into Star Wars even a little bit, I know George Lucas, when he was making those films, he says it's like poetry, it rhymes, right? And that's exactly right with Middle Earth. Everything can be called back to everything else. It all rhymes. It all feels very intrinsically connected, both in the movies that Peter Jackson made and obviously Tolkien's books.
Now if you're talking Star Wars, then the sequel trilogy must have been when the instruments broke, I guess.
That's when Melkor came in with his Discord and like ruined the sun. No, just oh man.
So
so I was gonna say, if we wanted to talk about that, to continue that Star Wars Middle Earth discussion, I mean, it's interesting because I think Star Wars and forgetting his name, but I think Matt, actually, I think you shared this on Twitter. The actor who played Obi-Wan, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Ewan McGregor?
The original Obi-Wan.
Alec Guinness.
Yeah, Alec Guinness. How he was inspired by the character of Gandalf and creating. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It makes so much sense. The Obi-Wan arc from the original trilogy. It's very, obviously similar in a way. He comes back from the dead. That's the first. The first, if you kind of forget what you know about Star Wars and watched from A New Hope on, then that would be the first time you'd see a Force ghost, and
That's
coming
true.
back from the dead to be a further mentor figure. It is very, very Gandalf-esque.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's definitely a conversation about archetypes to be had, and how literature inspires other literature, but it's definitely clear with the hero's journey, with everything from Frodo coming back to the Shire to free it from Sauron, to Luke Skywalker coming back to Tatooine to free that part from like Jabba the Hutt. Like there are definitely those connections to be made.
Yeah.
Another one, I talked to Clueless Fangirl Helen about this, but there's actually a really good parallel to be drawn between Turin Turambar and Anakin Skywalker during the prequels. Because Turin returns to Dor-Lomin after the Easterlings have taken over, just like how Anakin returns to Tatooine in Episode 2. He slaughters the Easterlings. He slaughters the Tusken Raiders. And it's this kind of fall of a hero, or even a tragic hero, because you understand why they're kind of doing what they're doing. Except in the end, Turin chooses kind of the light. He chooses to kill the dragon, and Anakin Skywalker chooses to join the dragon, join Palpatine, become, it's that kind of, whether that was intentional or not, I doubt that was an intentional story, like parallel, but it totally could have been,
I will say one of my favorite examples of like a circular nature of inspiration is, on the ice planet Hoth, you have the walkers, the Imperial walkers, and they're very reminiscent of the Mumakil from Return of the King, and then I think I've read somewhere that George Lucas was inspired by Lord of the Rings, and like that might have inspired that moment, having these giant walkers as they had giant elephants. And then in turn, the scene in Return of the King, that Peter Jackson's adaptation, is very reminiscent of Star Wars, how it was shot and everything. So and you even have Legolas playing Luke Skywalker taking one down single-handedly in the movie. So like,
funny, I never thought about that, but that's so true. That's so funny.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool, if that indeed was how it was, inspired from Tolkien to Lucas to Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good theory, if nothing else.
That's definitely a good theory. I mean, I made also like a little video about Star Wars and Tolkien, how the lore is connected a bit. And even though Star Wars has like a ton of inspirations, there's an interesting detail that when Lucas wrote the original the script for Star Wars, when it still was called The Star Wars, and I think Luke Skywalker was still called Starkiller.
Starkiller.
Yeah, in one of those very early drafts, there is the dialogue between him and Obi-Wan is exactly the dialogue, or referencing exactly the dialogue between Bilbo and Gandalf. It's really like it's really fun. There's a Good Morning one, in case people wonder. It's could try to find and can read it. But
really?
Then,
Good really, Morning?
That's amazing.
Wow.
It is.
I thought for sure when you were saying lifted straight from something, I was like, oh, it's probably
like Shadows
Gandalf,
of the Past.
Yeah, like Gandalf saying like, all you have to decide is what to do with the time is given to you, that kind of thing. But yeah, the Good Morning thing, I did not see that coming.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
I found that also fun. He did not include it because he thought, it could be copyright problems or something like this, because it was really close to the original.
Right.
It's really funny.
Clueless Fangirls in the chat. I'm going to ignore her Turin comment, because her and I have a big disagreement on Turin. I think he gets a bad rap because his fate was kind of predetermined, but she doesn't think of it that way. I'm going to ignore that comment.
See, she also doesn't like dwarves either. She has this thing. She's an elitist elf, is what she is.
Yeah, I forgot about her dwarven hatred.
Yeah, she hates the dwarves, which are like some of the best of all the people of Middle Earth. But
oh yeah, I mean they're loyal. They're honorable. Sure, they have a problem with greed, but like they still can't be dominated by some other person's will. They're just dominated by their own will to have jewelry.
Yeah.
Well, and gold.
And I think even more than that, to be honest, Yoystan, really, is they just want to be left alone. They're introverts at heart. Like, I can so relate to just wanting to go back to your cave and leave me alone. Like, I don't want your elven troubles in my Casa Doom.
That's a great point. And then that's always where the problems like stem from, is because somebody won't leave them alone, whether it's Balrog, orcs, Smaug, you know.
Like they just want to be left alone for
I like that.
And don't forget the dwarves bailed out, have bailed out the elves before a few times, like in the the Dagger Bragalach, when they fought against Glaurung, and then when Eregion gets sacked,
true.
They come out of Casa Doom and save tons of elves from certain doom. So
absolutely.
I think Galadriel also went through Khazad Doom.
Yeah. Wouldn't even have Galadriel would have been toast in Eregion, probably. I don't know. Maybe not.
Maybe
Galadriel's very awesome. Yeah, she's
pretty awesome. Clueless fangirl. I didn't want to be that guy. The Nernaith are Noediad, that's when those dwarves came out there. But
yeah.
No, you're good. I was like, I'm just gonna let it slide, but then Clueless fangirl, she's like, no. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, where would the elves be without the dwarves? Eventually the dwarves did take care of the goblins from Moria problem, because they reclaimed Moria in the Fourth Age. Sure, the elves may have been gone, but that's not the dwarves' fault.
And even before they, 2700 Third Age, there was the war between Dwarves and Orcs, where they basically almost cleansed the whole Misty Mountains from Orcs. Of course, some were left, but still, there was, it was huge. Also, we have the Battle of the Five Armies, which also stabilized the region there. Probably also helped out Thranduil a bit. That the orcs were decimated so big. There was I forgot the exact number because I'm very bad at memorizing numbers, but I think Gandalf in The Hobbit says after this battle the orc population in this region was, I don't know, halved or quartered or whatever, something like this. So it was
what you would only, I've explained this to people before with the films, we get the sense all these orcs came from Dol Guldur, where in actuality they were from the Misty Mountains and Gundabad and the Grey Mountains. So, there's this huge northern force of orcs that were spread out in that region.
All right, so Clueless fangirl, she's still not convinced. All right, so here we go. I think I've thought of a way that a dwarf and his actions saved all of elvenkind. So you have the dwarf in the first stage, Telkar. He built the sword Narsil. Narsil would be used by Elendil and then Isildur. Isildur would cut the ring from Sauron's hand only with the great blade that was forged by dwarves. Thus, Sauron wasn't able to continue his conquest to destroy all of elves and all of men because of a sword that dwarves forged.
Yep, not that elvish stuff.
Nah, man, it was all the dwarves.
Do you know why? Do you know why elvish blades glow? It's not. They say it's to detect orcs, but it's really because they're afraid of the dark.
Oh, dang, man, he's out here.
Wow. Oh man.
Oh, I love that. That's hilarious.
This is fun. We're just like Clueless fangirl is totally taking over the chat right now. She's all riled up now.
Yeah.
We've accomplished what we've set out to do today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we talked about dwarves while doing it. Awesome.
Yeah. She will start her conquest now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but this maybe leads us leads us a little bit into the dwarf topic, which we also intended for the discussion today. It's maybe to the sadness of Clueless Fangirl, I guess. But I think also dwarves are always an interesting topic in Tolkien, because they are so, I wouldn't say unusual. They seem to, if you think about Tolkien, you also think about dwarves, but compared to like elves and men, they are definitely different in many ways. And that makes them kind of very interesting.
I was watching a video on D&D dwarves recently, and they raised an interesting point. They said like dwarves throughout pretty much all of history, all of fiction, have pretty much been very similar. You get the similar idea of the ale drinking, right, bearded, heavy armor, or shirtless dwarf with a battle axe, and the like Germanic history or mythologies and kind of thoughts on the dwarves is similar in all of those ways. Whereas elves, throughout all of the history of our cultures, like elves have definitely shifted, and Tolkien kind of, I don't know, he made the elves what they are seen as in pop culture today. I feel like he kind of reestablished that as the norm.
He made elves great again. Is that what you're saying, Yoystan?
He did. Tolkien made elves great again, and he established their languages that are often seen kind of elsewhere. But with dwarves, it's really interesting that he reestablished and kind of strengthened who they've always been throughout all mythologies, all cultures, and I find that really fascinating, because you might say that those were the least, like, of all of the races, men, elves, hobbits, Ents, right? Those are the least ones he changed, are dwarves. I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I've never thought of that. I've obviously heard and thought of, how different elves are, when before Tolkien, I always, if you said elf, I thought of, Santa's elves.
Yeah, exactly.
Like little bitty teeny tiny guys running around, and now I think of, deadly archers who could shoot an orc between the eyes from 1,000 yards away or something. So that's interesting. I'd never thought about that with
that's
dwarves,
a good point. It's a really good point. They feel very I mean, they are very they're, as elves, also creatures or beings that have a very deep fundament in mythology, and but you are right. Maybe they feel closer to what their original imagination of these mythological beings is, compared to how the elves are maybe in Tolkien's. Of course, still Tolkien captured the essence, and there's also there's a lot of things when it comes to this topic. Like, for example, the plural with the elves is always written like VES at the end, which is like a very archaic writing of, I think it. And in German, the German translation, they try to capture it by also like an older version of the word elf, which also exists in German. We call them Elben or Elb with a B at the end, which is also like an older version to capture the spirit. It's very interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, with the elves are an interesting part of Tolkien, because I feel like those, I know he created hobbits and everything, and I don't get me wrong, I obviously love my hobbits. Honestly, I find myself very drawn to their way of life, but but I feel like in terms, oh, sorry.
Oh, who not?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I feel like with them though, it's pretty. They don't have too deep of a culture, and while I do think there are some ties between them and the ancestors of the Rohirrim, the Eothade, I don't think it goes too far beyond this kind of Anglo-Saxon culture almost. With elves, though, it's almost like he recreated that culture from the ground up, and I feel like that's where the heart of Tolkien's works are. And you get that sense after you read the Silmarillion, you read the Unfinished Tales, and you're like, oh, he cared mostly, like, of all the races, it seems like elves were his focus. It seems like elves, in later ages, it became how elves kind of gave way to their younger brothers and men,
Yeah.
and they kind of, let them inherit the world. But I feel like he was most concerned with elves in the Silmarillion, and you see why, because he constructs at least two languages, not even concerning their dialects, but Quenya and Sindarin, and he constructs all of these different cities and realms and kingdoms, types of elves. I think, Matt, you did a like Clans of the Elves video recently, right? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, explaining like basically every time, during their migration west, like every time a group breaks off, they get new names. It's crazy how many names there are for every it's like these dwarves, these elves, they broke off, so then they get this name, and then part of that group they break off, and so they get this name. It just
that
goes
translates
on and
into
on.
this, in our language. And I remember I made a Clans of the Elves video. It's like 15 minutes or so, like a couple years ago, and it was one of the more difficult and complicated videos I've done. It's one of the ones I'm most proud of, because exactly like you say, it's like the amount of names and dialects and languages that they all have is just it's insane. It's incredible. It's amazing. So I feel like those were his focus in kind of redefining what it, in his original writings, what they were as gnomes, and then how they became the Noldoli and the Noldor, and then the elves, and all of that. It's incredible. I feel like that was part of the most defining thing about the genre and about Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion and the Hobbit as a whole, is how he defined elves, for sure.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. There's just so much when it comes to the lore of the elves. I mean, I think my longest video on my channel is 95 minutes, and it's only about Círdan and his way to the Third Age.
That's awesome.
Wow, man.
It's wow. It's just, I was just even scratching the surface with it. It's still some topics I had to leave out and so on, because it's just too much.
Yeah,
I
feel like that's the struggle we probably all three have experienced, that struggle.
Oh yeah.
Just about every video you do, if you're, especially in the early days, I would end up with these just crazy long scripts because I was including too much stuff, and I would have to cut back and say, okay, no, I need to stick to the highlights. And it's just, again, a testament to the detail that Tolkien goes into. But yeah, it's always that constant struggle. Like, I want to go into detail because the details are amazing, but you have to kind of pick and choose. Otherwise, you spend like 3 hours talking about, Galadriel or something.
Oh yeah, it's so easy to get roped into
that's
accidentally talking about the smallest detail that's so interesting.
That's why my videos end up so long usually. I'm very bad at cutting stuff out. Even though I already cut stuff out. Like for my Sauron video, it's also, I don't know, 70 minutes or 75 or something. I have like, I think 3 pages cut out of the script already.
Man. Yeah, it's difficult when you're doing a small character versus a large character, just how you approach those like videos, because with a large character, you just walk in knowing it's like, okay, I can't talk about everything. But then you make a video on Prince Imrahil, and it's like, okay, this morning he had this to eat for breakfast. And it's like, okay, is this really worth putting in? Nope, okay, I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah, that is true. That is pretty true. I mean, the elf video that got like 1.5 hours long was originally intended only to be about Círdan, and then I just covered every detail of elf lore that he could be connected to with it, and it'd be like a video about the history of the elves instead of the video about Círdan, but still like it a lot. It's just, there's just so much. There will be more videos. I think the only other race or peoples of the only other people of Middle Earth that might have a comparable complex lore are men. I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot about men. It's just sometimes you forget because a lot of it is buried by a lot of generations, basically. While you have, like, in the First Age, you have Galadriel, and you have Galadriel in the, I don't know, Third Age still. In the Fourth Age, she's in Valinor and so on. So there's just a huge span, but you only have one character. When it comes to men, you have like in the first age very different men than you have in the second age, or even throughout the first age. There are all kinds of men around. Like a very iconic scene is the death of Bear and the elf wondering what is happening to him.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. With men, it's interesting. Like Tolkien drew, and this is where when people say Middle Earth is almost like a mythical history or mythological history for our own world. It's true in a sense, because you see with men like the Rohirrim, you have those Anglo-Saxon ties. With the Northmen of Rhovanion, you have the Norse ties. With the men of Gondor, you kind of see a bit of Roman and more Saxon stuff involved there, if my memory serves me. And yeah, I mean Numenor. You kind of have almost the Atlantis mythology drawn into that. So with that, it's really interesting, because he was definitely concerned with how the world of elves passed into the world of men, and how the glories and beauties of the elder days of the elder race were passed into today's society, and that longing for what will never be again, right? For the longing that we can all feel when we think back to a good moment in our childhood, where it's like that'll never exist again. He draws on that nostalgia element, and I think that's one of the things that makes his work so impactful. And you see that a lot in how men think of elves, how elves think of the older elves and their realms of elder days. You see that in dwarves and how they think of their former realms and their kingdoms that were taken from them. But with men, it's interesting, because the men that are closest to elves, those that speak their languages, those that are friends with them, are just like objectively more moralistic and more good men than those who defy elves and who go against elves and don't speak their language, speak Andunaic, right, and the Numenorian language. And it's just really interesting how it's still somewhat revolved around this elven landscape, this elven world, but it's how did their world become our world? And it's so good.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'm most excited about potentially. I really hope they pull off in the Amazon show. Just thinking as you're talking, I go back to thinking of how the lives of men are so brief in the eyes of elves. And you think of Elrond, his brother Elros, and the potential there, with the show in particular, you have generations that follow Elrond's brother, and you could see Elrond interact with generations that have followed his brother, and like how far they fall, and like
amazing.
Then the resurgence, with Elendil and his group. There's so much potential there, like for some really rich storytelling. I feel like, just like I said, just looking at the character of Elrond.
Oh yeah, and that's where I hope there is a central focus on, Elrond, Galadriel, Celebrimbor, Gil-galad. Yeah, for those reasons exactly, because of how they interact with the generations that became the Aragorns of the world, and that became the, the Elendils and all of that.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, also, what is interesting in this regard is like the connection between men and elves in a way. Like if we look at Lord of the Rings, like Minas Tirith. Wait, I have a screenshot here in the background. If you look at it, basically this is also somewhat elvish in a weird way, because the cultures of the faithful is so connected to the elves. They have the white tree. Maybe a bit of this architecture could be considered distantly elvish, I would say. And it is.
I mean, with Minas Tirith especially, it recalls Gondolin, and Gondolin recalls Tirion in Valinor. So
there's like also a connection, only between a certain group of men, which are the Dún Edain, or the faithful of those. And this breaks apart probably when you look at the Easterlings or the Rohirrim. and so on. And so there are
Oh, yeah.
definitely different aspects, but it's also interesting that as you said, as we said like minutes ago, how important the elves were in Tolkien's world, and I think you see the elven culture aspect also in some parts of Men, and especially those that are very important for the bigger stories. That is
yeah, absolutely.
definitely interesting. And yeah, we also have the alliance of elves and men, and even though the dwarfs are also fighting, I guess, in this battle and joining, and are rarely mentioned though.
Yeah,
Can't forget the dwarves now.
Yeah, they always forget the dwarf.
there's like one sentence in the Silmarillion, but they were there at
They were there.
War of the
It's
Last
one
Alliance.
sentence. They were there though. Also fought in it, and yeah, it's my opinion. Kind of interesting. Still, though, if we look back at the origins of the bigger stories, which is, man, it's not the origin. That's not true though. But when it comes to publication, at least, it is The Hobbit, which is of course a story that is strongly tied around the dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
It is like another aspect, and it also contributes to the topic of the feud between dwarves and elves that is going on, which is a very interesting aspect of the lore. While I think were there many feuds between men and elves? Probably not. When the Dún Edain arrived in Beleriand, they were at least to some degree welcomed by the elves, at least some elves. Finrod, of course, being a prime example here. And then they also became vassals and basically worked for the elves and helped them out in their war and defending their realms against Morgoth's armies and so on.
I can't remember. Maybe it was both times, but when men joined Morgoth against the elves in the First Age, like the Easterlings of Beleriand, and then when men joined Sauron against the War of the Last Alliance at the end of the Second Age, that was something the elves never forgot, and that was something like duly overtly noted in those texts, was that the elves never forgot that men had gone against them. But it was, again, like you say, it was never the Dún Edain. It was never the three houses of the Edain, the faithful men.
And it's interesting. Yeah. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
It's interesting too. As you were talking about that, I was thinking back to the First Age. I was trying to think like, okay, what are instances of men like, for lack of a better term, screwing over the elves? And there's not really that come to mind. I think of all the most egregious aspects of betrayal, aside from the Easterlings and the Nirnaeth, are really elves betraying their own kind. You think of Gondolin and there's all these instances, and it's never the men who know where Gondolin is. They're Hurin's the one that stares Morgoth in the face and says no, and then it's an elf that ends up giving him the location of Gondolin.
Yeah, it's funny. Hurin, he accidentally did give away like the region in which Gondolin was, but that was because he needed help, but it was never on purpose to help Morgoth. Yeah, he did stare the devil in the face and say no. And yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I can think of with Turin, right, and those few instances where whether it was like his arrogance or his ignorance, like he got a couple elves killed for sure.
True.
But
again, I was thinking outright like betrayal. I guess the story of Turin's pretty good examples of elves collateral damage.
Yeah. That's the best way to put that. Yeah, collateral damage.
That's the most diplomatic way to say it, I
Yes,
guess.
Yeah.
It is.
But with the conversation of dwarves and elves, it's funny because they're kind of the most diametrically opposed of races in Middle Earth, at least of the Free Peoples. But at the same time, they're very alike, especially like if you look at the Noldor and the dwarves who are crafters. It's like they're very alike. They're very culturally present. They have a lot of respect and honor for their own cultures. But it's the difference between a mountain and a tree, right? It's the difference between or in a forest. Yeah, so it's
there's an interesting detail to this too. In Aule calls the mountains. No, I think it's Yavanna calls it the trees of Aule, the mountains. And that it underlines this a little bit more, that this is, as you say, it's basically somewhat a conceptual opposite, but in a way they are also very similar, at least when it comes to the Noldor Dwarves and Elves. It's a very good point that you made there.
Yeah, thank you. And it's interesting because, for as much as they've kind of butted heads, the only kind of example that we have of dwarves killing elves is in that first age, right? The Battle of the Thousand Caves and the battle at Sarn Athrad. And but beyond that, they act like they're always at each other's throats, but they're really not. It's almost like a rivalry between brothers.
Yeah.
It's and it's just like at the end of the day, you can expect them to have each other's backs, but they just are going to go about it in a different way. It's more of it's not so much of like a huge feud as it is just kind of a petty argument, I feel like.
Especially when you look at the feud itself. Okay, there are multiple versions of it, of course, as mentioned earlier. But as we can, it's basically always connected to the Silmarilli, and it's like, okay, Thingol wanted those, and of course they want them too. They are the Silmaril. Who does not want to have a Silmaril? Like it's kind of understandable. Both had this huge appreciation for the beauty of and the power of those gems, and they just wanted to have them. As Thingol was warned before that getting the Silmaril might not be a good idea by his wife Melian, and it was in the end it was his doom, and it also underlined the constant disliking of elves and men from that point, because it's very interesting that the dwarves helped Thingol to build his cave, and to also they helped him. I think they also made the Nauglamir, if I'm not mistaken, and then later the Silmaril became the Nauglamir is like what do you call it? Not an amulet.
Like its vessel.
Necklace.
Yeah. A necklace, that's the word, yeah. A necklace, and the Silmaril was put into it later. And then the Nauglamir itself was considered one of the most beautiful jewelry that was around, basically, and was largely desired. And then they combined this other very, very legendary gem, one of the Silmarilli, into this, and then it just was mind-blowing. So, of course, even Morgoth wanted the Silmarilli. So, it's kind of understandable that on a very basic level that this conflict could have happened in the past. And it's kind of interesting to see that it continued for such a long time. And it was like, I don't know, in the original version, it was not a misunderstanding, but I think in the original version, two dwarfs escaped and basically did not tell the truth about what happened, because they don't want to get the blame. And then this conflict basically started based on a little lie. That was, I think, the original version of one of the earlier versions of Tolkien that he had, and Christopher Tolkien had to change it a lot to make it fit into the Silmarillion, but
actually, I think that is what I recall, at least from my Silmarillion. I think that is the version, Matt.
I think you're right. I think they went back and said that they refused payment or something. That Thingol refused to pay.
I have to admit, in my mind, those versions fused a little bit. And the biggest difference between the versions is that it was around the time when they hunted the Karcharoth. The hound of Morgoth. Thingol went out and hunted him, and then there he was surprised by the dwarves and killed in this conflict. While that was connected originally. If I remember correctly.
That's news to me. I've never heard that version before, but that's really interesting. He would have been open to attack then, and that. Oh wow.
Yeah, but the problem was, it seems like Tolkien did not consider that the girdle of Melian was protecting this area, and the Karkaros, I think, could only pass because his fate was greater than the power of Melian, and they had no excuse for the dwarves to be there. I think Tolkien tried it with, like, they had an elf that helped him to get past it, but that would also be very weird, in my opinion, so it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And Christopher Tolkien had to change it then. That's a lot. So the essence is basically the same, but some of the details and connections were different originally.
That makes sense. And they probably wanted to use Thingol in the... If he would have died at that point, he couldn't have been in the Children of Húrin or anything like that.
Exactly. That is the next problem that comes to it. Exactly. So
Clueless fangirl, the Bloody Dwarves, just saying. I mean, elves, in the first age, the elves were bloodier than the dwarves were. I mean,
my gosh. Yeah, I mean, you talk about, the greed of dwarves, but I mean, show me the dwarves whose entire family took a blood oath to kill their own people if they didn't get jewelry back,
Yeah. And then
you won't give me boats? All right. I guess I gotta kill you then.
Kill you. Yeah, right. Dwarves didn't kill anybody over boats.
Yeah.
and then he convinced all the other, or not all the, but a lot of Noldor to come with him on his war against Morgoth, and then he sailed over and burned the ships, so they had to walk.
Burn the ships.
Oh yeah, I was talking about this yesterday on my Patreon podcast. Like, it's so funny that, like, it's so ironic that Feanor, he drags all the Noldor into this battle, like, inspirational. He's like, yeah, let's go get them. Sails across the ocean, burns the ship, like, goes into battle and dies, like, immediately.
Yeah, it's basically
and then everybody
like
else is like, why did we come here again? this guy who died, like, who ran right into battle and died, the first thing he did, pretty much.
Yeah,
and then his kids are saddled with that oath that I imagine Feanor's speech is like a really good, sports movie with a good pep talk from a coach, and everyone's just like, yeah, let's go. And then they get over there, Feanor dies almost instantly, and it's like, shoot.
I think we screwed.
The quarterback goes down immediately, and it's like, you gave that speech. Wait.
Like, now we're saddled with this oath, so like we have to kill everybody. Oh man.
Yeah. But they went with it to the very last. We have to give them that. But yeah, it's a really fascinating story that is also, I don't know, it feels very... The first age always feels very mythologic in a way, like like could be like straight out of a myth. It's always fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
So people, we are probably at the end of the podcast, I think. I mean, we could go on for hours. I don't mind, but Yoystan gave me like a time limit, and I think we have reached it.
I'm sorry, I gotta go hit the gym like Tulkas, right? Think of him in my mind as I'm there.
That's a good one. I have to hit the gym like Tulkas.
I feel like there's a T-shirt design in there.
Yeah, I see that too. I
need to get on that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's true. Oh, I love it.
You heard it here first. So yeah, I would say because it's already late, I can't believe that 2 hours are already over.
Yeah, that was fast.
Crazy.
It was really fun. Well, it was a lot of fun with you guys. I'm really honored that you were here talking with me about Tolkien and other things. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Yeah,
thanks
that was a great time.
So we have. Let me just check. I hope I prepared this. I did. Oh, great. So we have at the end, as it's tradition, a shout-out section where each of you can say maybe what's coming next, where do people find you, what you're doing, stuff like this. So maybe we start with Yoystan.
Thank you again for having me. It was a great time. You can find me on YouTube at Men of the West. We, talk about this every week. So I do Tolkien videos every Sunday, and I'm on Twitter and Facebook as well at the same. I guess on Twitter I'm at Yoystan. So we do have. I don't know how much we can talk about this now, but we'll just we'll just foreshadow it a little bit. For the 25th, a very important date in Middle Earth, we've got a huge collaboration coming up between all the Tolkien channels. So look out for that. So yeah, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Nice. Yeah, of course, our little collaboration that's coming up on Tolkien Reading Day will be really nice. So yeah, let's continue with Matt.
Yeah. So my YouTube channel is Nerd of the Rings. So that's at youtube.com/Nerd of the Rings. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. And I will also be partaking in next week's Tolkien Reading Day festivities. And I am this Saturday. So my videos come out Saturdays at noon Eastern time. I'm going to be debuting a new series that I'm doing where I'm going to be tackling misconceptions of Tolkien's work. So like if
that's awesome.
if you're like a movie only fan and you thought something, we're going to take it common misconceptions that people have, whether it's because they're not familiar with the books or they've only seen the movies, stuff like that. So I won't reveal the title of this one because I'm keeping it under wraps for now, but it's coming on Saturday. So
Cool. Okay, so yeah, for the few people who don't know who I am, might hearing this podcast with this guy. I hosted this podcast, and yeah, I'm the Philosopher's Games, aka Chris, TPhGames in short. And yeah, you see on the screen my stuff like YouTube/the Philosopher's Games, Twitch, same, and at PhilosopherGames at Twitter. I do also Tolkien lore stuff, also cover video games at times. Right now I cover them a little bit more, but after next video there will be a lot more Tolkien content on my channel again. I also live stream on Twitch at times where I play some games, and sometimes I also do like experimental journeys into other topics, like I did a video about cyberpunk as a subgenre or something like this. But stuff like this you'll find on my channel. That is the episode, I guess, for today. Again, thank you guys, much appreciated that you are here. There will be a VOD for this on my YouTube channel, and there will be also the audio-only version on Spotify and iTunes and whatnot. As a podcast version, check out those. Links should be somewhere here. And thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this show. See you to the next episode of the of Games and Rings podcast. See you next time. Goodbye.